YouTube. We are back. Today, I am reacting to another Crowder video. This is Crowder's Closers. Toxic Masculinity is that what we're calling it now? That's the title of the video. Before we start, if you guys could do me a huge favor by liking, subscribing, and commenting on my reactions. This channel is growing small. I appreciate all the views, all the likes, all the subscriptions I've been getting lately. And if you guys keep liking, you guys keep following the content, I'm gonna keep producing the content. Eventually, I want the channel to grow and be something completely different. So we'll see what happens in the future. But for right now, without any further ado, let's watch the video.
Mug clubs for closers.
Let's talk about toxic masculinity. I think this is something that's been tossed around quite a bit, and Cortez has talked about this, so it seems fitting. I was at the vet this week, and I'm hoping this is one thing. The vet stuff always, I think Joe Rogan and Kevin Smith were talking about this. The dog stuff always gets me, so hopefully I'm not going to be too emotional. But I was at the vet this week. Everything's kind of okay, but it's been rough with the chemo treatment. Again, I appreciate the kind words of support. But I was there at this emergency vet on Saturday, and when I was waiting there in the waiting room, there was this 15-year-old girl who was crying, and it's one of those things I will genuinely never forget this girl's face. I feel things really deeply, but I'm socially very awkward. People who've probably met me, sometimes they're surprised, like when we do a Change My Mind or do the shows, like, oh, I would have thought this Steve would be a little bit more outgoing. Whereas my dad was with me, and he knows the right thing to say. So this girl was crying. She was very upset, and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" And she said, "I had to brought in my 14-year-old dog, and she had a seizure, and she was crying. She couldn't, just tears streaming down her face." And I said, "Oh yeah, that's kind of tough," and talked about what we were kind of going through with Hopper and the cancer treatment. And I didn't know what to say. I kind of just fizzled out. And my dad saved it and said, like, "Hey, do you want some water?" He took some water from the fridge there, and he said, "Hey, I'm buying," because it was free water. And she kind of laughed. She was wearing a sweater that said Canada on it. I think it's one of those Roots sweaters as a company. And so we asked her if she was from Canada. She was from upstate New York. And she forgot about it for a little bit. She stopped crying for a little bit. She was very awkward, this girl, too. Frizzy hair. Probably someone who was very, very close with her dog.
I mean, quick question is, where are the parents at? Like, you have two grown men talking to. I mean, I'm not trying to make this. Here's what it is. Where are the parents?
Probably the kind of person who maybe had a deeper connection with her dog than most people. I know I had deeper connections with animals as a kid sometimes than I did with people, because I didn't know how to relate to them. And so I'm trying to find a way to get into this. Again, I'm trying to keep my emotions in check. When we were leaving, we were okay. And as I was, to kind of give you an idea what this looks like, I'm trying to see if you can see scope. There's a wall divide, and there's a glass door. And so there's a little bit of a cutout where, you pay for whatever service is rendered. And I can see her on the other side of this wall through a glass door, the 15-year-old girl. And at this point, she was sobbing, but after we spoke with her, she seemed a little bit better. She was looking things up on her phone, a little more talkative in the waiting room. And I sent my dad out with the crate to our car. We pulled the car around, and I saw her mom, and there was no dad there. So I can see both sides of this dividing wall, and I saw her mom talking to the vet. And I overheard her saying, how does this work with a 14, 15-year-old girl? Is she going to hold her? And the vet said, well, it depends if you think she's most comfortable doing that. And it's one of those things where I'm in this position where I can see effectively that this girl's whole world is about to become unglued. And I didn't sleep at all that night. All I could see was her face all night long. It was unbelievably hard. And I gathered myself. I walked through the glass door, went on the other side of the wall. I said, "Hey, really love your sweater. God bless. Hope you have a good night." And she said, "Oh, thank you." And she was smiling. I can't remember. I made some kind of a joke, and walked.
I can tell he's like struggling with this right now. Even kind of like retelling the story, he's like almost like struggling with the whole concept. But this is getting good.
Out. That's what toxic masculinity is. And let me explain what that means. We don't show our emotions all the time. We're all constantly accused of, you're not showing your emotions because of a toxically masculine culture. It's not because we're afraid of being teased or because we're afraid of feeling. In that instance, I walked out to my car, by the way, with my dad, and I cried. It was absolutely heartbreaking. But I knew that in that moment, that wasn't going to help her. That's toxic masculinity. Why?
It's true. It's true. Like there's moments to cry and there's moments to like kind of like man up. You just have to know the correct situation. Just because it's a sad situation doesn't mean that you need to cry over it. You know, if you are needed in a particular situation, your best option is to become the person that's needed for that particular situation. Then when you see that it's a safe environment where you as a man is not needed to be a man, then yeah, maybe you can let it tear out. But not every situation is worth you crying.
Why did I go out there? And even if it's just a laugh for 20 seconds before I know she's going to have to hold her 14-year-old dog before they put it down, why would it matter? Why would I go out there and try to be strong? I know it sounds silly for this 15-year-old girl, because if even for 15 seconds I can protect a girl like that from pain. And it's the same thing with our family members, with our wives, with our daughters, with our sisters. This is why men act the way that we do. It's because we love you. It's because we want to protect you. We hate to see people in pain. We hate to see the people that we love in pain. That's toxic masculinity. I'll tell you this, I wanted to give this girl a hug, and I know I can't because, of course it would be inappropriate, but I felt so bad for her, and there was no dad present. Doesn't mean that there wasn't a dad. Doesn't mean that she doesn't have a dad, but it was that much more heartbreaking. Again, it's this primal reaction, this visceral reaction that a man will have if there is a woman who is vulnerable, who is exposed, and there is no man.
That's true. Like, I don't know what it is about like the male nature. Like when we see like a woman's tear, like the child's tear, it's in our nature to come and figure out what's going on with the situation. Like as if you're like a masculine man. If you're a feminine man, it just doesn't work. But if you're a masculine man and you see an issue where a woman's crying, it kind of like urges you to figure out how to solve the solution. I don't know what it is.
There to help her. That's toxic masculinity. And you might say it's the damsel in distress syndrome. Fine.
Might be, yeah.
Okay. I'm okay with it. It's in our nature to protect and to provide. Just as it's in your nature, women, to nurture, care for. Okay? We want to prevent pain for you at all costs. And by the way, I understand this. Ironically, sometimes that leads to us causing pain.
Yeah.
We get so stressed out over trying to provide, to protect, whether it's work, whether it's trying to be strong emotionally, that we end up lashing out at those who we live to provide for, who we live to protect. Just like women, ironically, end up suffocating the people they love sometimes, or spoiling them with children. It's in our nature, and it needs to be bridled. That's toxic masculinity. But I don't think that it's a nature that should be condemned just because it's a part of our genetic makeup. It would be emotionally selfish. It would be incredibly emotionally selfish. I came back home that night too. I came back to my wife, brought the dogs in, and she was obviously very worried. Everything was fine, but she was obviously very worried. And I made sure that when I came in, kind of had an even keeled temper, explained what happened, were we gonna have to give the dog antibiotics. And once she was settled, about 30 minutes after that, she asked me, she said, what's wrong? What's bothering you? And that's when I told her what I had experienced with the 15-year-old girl, that they were going to put the dog down. And at that point in time, because I had made sure that my wife was taken care of before myself, that's toxic masculinity, by the way, and that's a biblical notion. The idea of esteeming others first, of treating your wives and your women as the best among you. By the way, that wasn't an ideal. When we talk about where do we get morals from, the idea of mercy, it wasn't really considered a virtue in a lot of societies until modern Christendom. The idea of treating your wives as the best among you, the idea of treating your wives with love, and I get it, people will say, well, what about submit to your husbands? Okay, it talks about men loving your wives. That was actually kind of unique when Christ came around. This is just me talking about my worldview. Once I had made sure that my wife was taken care of, that I had quelled any fears or anxiety she had, I told her about what had happened. And at that point, guess what? It was fine for me to be vulnerable with my wife. It was...
See, I don't know. I don't know if I can ever be like vulnerable with my wife. That's a bridge too far for me to cross. I always want her to think of me as like a rock, like you want to be the superhero to the day you die. Like you always want to be that man, that dude that she can always rely on. I don't know, man. I don't think I can have a cry in front of my wife.
It was fine for me to shed a tear and explain something that was deeply impactful and hurtful. And my wife would never condemn me for it. And that's
rare.
because we have an open, complementary relationship where we understand each other's needs and do our best to meet them as members of the opposite sex. That's toxic masculinity. This idea that men just, by the way, the idea that expressing, Jordan Peterson is talking about this, just expressing emotions is somehow inherently helpful. It's not true. Let me give you those examples right there. You know how I felt when I saw that 15-year-old girl? I wanted to cry. I felt terrible. I wanted to go into hysterics. So you don't think men feel that? Of course. Would it help her? No, it would be selfish. When I came home, it was late. I was tired. I felt this cold coming down, or flu, whatever the hell it is. Ebola, SARS, what is SARS, whatever the hell it is. We had Zika. Zika was a thing. Swine, sexy flu. You don't think I would love to come in and go, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe the night I had. But that would be emotionally selfish. And so I ensured that I came in and said, okay, sweetheart, how are you? Let me explain this to you. Everything's okay. I love you. Are you secure? All right, here's an emotional need that I have right now when she asked. There's no...
See, if I had that same situation, I would more or less hit one of my boys up that I know I can trust. Like, I would not... I mean, if you have that kind of a woman that can actually hold you down to the point where it's okay to be vulnerable, that's kind of rare to find. But if you do have that, I guess it's good, because that'll make her more invested into you and you being more invested into her. But I've never been with a woman that's like that open to hearing me complain about some bullshit.
Appropriate time to express emotion. And it's not becoming of a young man to do that. There's nothing wrong with men crying. Okay?
No.
There's something wrong with telling boys and telling young men that they should cry for the sake of crying, or that it's inherently a virtue to cry. It's not. It's inherently a good thing to bridle your emotions, to moderate your own instincts instead of just acting on them. And I would say it's an inherently good thing to teach young men to be vulnerable with the people they trust and they love, like their wives, like their families. That's toxic masculinity. There's this idea that people talk about quite a bit, as though men either have to live into this archetype of big dumb jock or the sensitive artistic type who cries. You realize it's a very new thing? Look at the readings of Teddy Roosevelt or even Abraham Lincoln. These were people who were artistic. These were people who often were musically inclined, people who would paint, people who would write poetry. And then they were incredibly intelligent and physically robust. You were not considered a complete man unless all of these facets made up your masculinity. That's toxic masculinity. It broke apart, really, with modern progressive feminism. I hate to beat a dead horse here, but that's where we really separated people with the sexual revolution. And honestly, it just made it easier for scumbags to get laid. Let's be honest. That one's not working out really well for women. The original term, I've talked about this before, and I'll leave you with this, was, you've heard this expression, jack of all trades, master of none. It was originally jack of all trades, master of one. Meaning you were expected to be a jack of all trades, adequate, passable in all facets of life, and to be a master of one domain. That's what would make a truly great person, a truly great artist, truly great at anything. But that's what makes a truly great man as well. That's when we talk about toxic masculinity and we throw the baby out with the bathwater, we're throwing out everything that's created. Modern medicine, this Western civilization that has served, protected, and provided for women throughout centuries. Men want to do that. That's toxic masculinity. We want to provide for you. We want to protect you. That's toxic masculinity. And sometimes it comes with some shit that you don't want. That's what happens. But we condemn, and this is what worries me too, is this generation of boys that we have now going out there. We've talked about incels. That's a very small microcosm of it. But imagine an entire generation. Now really, we're going on 2 generations of boys who've been told that all of their instincts, all of their hardwiring is wrong and toxic. They're going to be afraid to be who they are. We can't. How do you juxtapose that?
Yeah, that's a dangerous world where men can't be men. I don't know how to change my behavior. Like it's part of my programming. So it's a very, very crazy world we live in, where we're trying to make men more feminine, which only hurts women at the end of the day, because women don't want feminine men. So if you're trying to feminize men, the only thing that happens is that you have more women for that one masculine man. So there's not enough masculine men out there.
Where you say, hey, yeah, it's toxic masculinity. This idea that you don't want to cry, this idea that you want to be tough, this idea that you want to be athletic, this idea that you want to be great, this idea that you want to be competitive, that's toxic. Don't engage any of those instincts that you have. By the way, keep it real. Do you understand what kind of a conflicted message that is to send young men? And I'm hoping that there are some women watching this, particularly some young feminist women who maybe haven't peered behind the curtain, who maybe haven't understood what it is that makes young men tick. We love, we care, and we are just as emotional, and we don't act on it because we love you. That's toxic masculinity. Hey there, here I am.
So that's pretty much it. I mean, he pretty much went off on toxic masculinity. I don't believe that exists. It's a way to kind of like shame men for being men. But guys, you have to be the best version of yourself. You always have to be. I get it, bro. Don't listen to what women want. Become the best version of yourself. Become the best male version of yourself, and watch how women naturally respond to that. Because a feminine woman will want a masculine man. It's just biology. Well, thank you guys for watching the video. Till next time, deuces.